Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the often overlooked follow-up to the popular 1996 Looney Tunes movie Space Jam, the 2003 movie Looney Tunes Back in Action. Originally devised and intended to be a sequel to Space Jam, entitled Spy Jam, Back in Action was ultimately produced as more of a kind of a standalone entry, choosing to offer us a different setting in the Looney Tunes world than that seen in Space Jam. And so, although Back in Action is the second full-length Looney Tunes animation and live-action mixed feature, it sets out to do its own thing and is not considered a true sequel to Space Jam, nor within its canon, for the most part. So, Back in Action sees the rivalry reach ahead between Bugs Bunny, as voiced by Joe Alaskey, and Daffy Duck, as also voiced by Joe Alaskey, where at the Warner Brothers studio, a change in direction sees them can Daffy in favour of focusing more on their star attraction, Bugs, of course, you know? After causing chaos through the studio as he exits, Daffy ends up teaming up with struggling stuntman Damien DJ Drake, as played by Brendan Fraser, who works at the studio as a security guard. DJ's dad, as played by Timothy Dalton no less, was a renowned and respected action film star, but who, it turns out, moonlighted as a super spy, and who has now found himself at trouble at the hands of the Acme Corporation, headed by the evil and diabolical madman Mr. Chairman, as played by Steve Martin, whose intent on seeing the human race turned into monkeys as part of his scheme for Acme to dominate the marketplace, using the monkeys as slave labour and then turning everybody back into human again, having them buy the products they've just made. Yeah, it is all a little bit odd. Together, DJ and Daffy, and indeed along with Bugs and Stu and the studio's vice president of comedy, Kate Houghton, as played by Jenna Elfman, set out and embark on an unexpected and often eccentric and zany mission to rescue DJ's father and stop the chairman's plans. One which takes them around the world, from Las Vegas to Paris and even into the heart of Africa. So, compared to Space Jam, this movie bombed when it was released, and today it certainly doesn't carry the same cult status and charm for many that Space Jam does. However, and I may be quite controversial here, I'm taking a step back again, even in my own household, but really I did enjoy this movie far more than I did Space Jam. It still wasn't without its faults, but for me this was far closer to what I would want from a Looney Tunes movie this time around. It certainly had a different kind of energy and far more from our hapless toons, you know, which was exactly what I'd been asking for. In this movie, we are now in a world where toons live and work amongst humans, very much akin to the 1988 movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, I would say that this actually works better as a sequel to that film than it does Space Jam. Although it's not, please don't take that as fact. That is, what's the word that we use today? Fake news. That is not the truth. It just seems that way, you know? Although, don't get me wrong, it is not quite in the same league as Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Not by a long shot, you know? But it's got that, it's on the same, it's the same style. That's what I would suggest in terms of the animation versus the live action. It has its own quirky appeal, for sure, and I just love the zany antics of the Looney Tunes. I always have, with a lot more featuring more prominently as part of the overall plot. From favourites such as Willie E. Coyote, Foghorn Leghorn, Elmer Fudd, Yosemite Sam, Taz, and even Duck Dodgers getting in on the action. So indeed, it is fantastic from this point of view, and for me, their comedy was absolutely on point and in keeping with the absolute mayhem and antics we had come to love from their cartoon outings. The problems for me stem from the overall plot, which, accepted, it is Looney Tunes after all, but it just seems to be all over the place and tries to be far too much all at the same time. It's just not coherent enough to hold together well enough that we can kind of grab a hold of anything substantial as an audience. It still rather plays like a bunch of cartoons strung together, you know? Now, this in itself wouldn't have been a bad thing. I'll sit and watch a whole heap, hours and a half's worth of Looney Tunes cartoons, if this is indeed what it set out to do, you know? But this tried to be the Looney Tunes answer to Men in Black, and it simply didn't work nowhere near as well. The human elements just don't hold their end up, you know? I mean, kudos to Brendan Fraser and Jenna Elfman for trying, and even to Steve Martin for putting in his all, you know? And then some. But I just couldn't get into his character at all. I have really kind of always had kind of a hard time enjoying humans acting themselves as cartoon characters, you know? There's kind of only really been a small handful along the way that have really kind of cracked it. I mean, Jerry Lewis and Jim Carrey, a couple that spring to mind, you know? They are cartoon characters in themselves, but I just found that many of the performances, especially Martin's, to be too cheesy, awkward at times, and cringeworthy at best, you know? Just not quite the same chemistry as their Looney Tune co-stars. It's a bit like watching a fairly poor pantomime when all's said and done. The animation has been done well enough, but with the advent of computer animation being used more prolifically throughout, it just doesn't have the same kind of feel, like love and tension that Space Jam had. This almost feels rushed and doesn't quite sync in places between the animation and the live action elements, which can be a little bit off-putting. I mean, if you're going to make one of these films, especially for the Looney Tunes, you really do have to make this feel believable. And the characters, I mean, that's one thing I would say for Space Jam. For its time, it felt believable. Yeah, it didn't mesh all the time, but it felt believable. This doesn't feel believable. It doesn't make you believe that Bugs and Daffy and all these other characters are actually there. Not all the time. It does. I mean, in parts, but then it doesn't. And that's what can be off-putting. You do realise you're watching a cartoon. And that is certainly one of the many advantages of watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I mean, that film is fantastic. I mean, go watch my review for that one, but watch this one first. But yeah, the way that they've done the live action and the animation, that one is just absolutely seamless. It isn't seamless in this movie. But despite all of this, there are enough classic Looney Tunes throwbacks to really keep my attention. There really was. And in making the film somewhat of an enjoyable experience. It also plays to a lot of Warner Brothers properties, such as Scooby-Doo, Batman, Gremlins, and even, I don't know if this is a true Warner Brothers property, but Robbie the Robot from the 1956 feature Forbidden Planet. Go watch my review of that one too. They even make a guest appearance, you know, which again, for as whimsical as they are, make for some light-hearted entertainment relief, you know, and, you know, as they're kind of scattered throughout the film. And that is the kind of thing that I love, you know, I must admit, and certainly in a film like this, where you're always kind of on the edge of your seat looking for these next kind of cameo roles. Bugs and Daffy, excellent once again. I mean, they steal the show with their antics, and this time around, you know, are in the movie right from the beginning. It is just a shame that although the movie kind of centres on them at the start, they then kind of do become secondary characters, mostly kind of kept around for their own brand of haphazard slapstick. And to me, that is a problem, you know? They should have been up there, up centre, and starring in this movie, you know? As it does get going, there are some excellent chase sequences, Looney Tunes style, and some fantastic moments in the Louvre, as our hapless bunch end up mixing it up tune style in some of the most iconic paintings in the world, putting their own stamp on these classics, if you like. That part of the animation is absolutely spot on. You know, it's hilarious and is one of the movie's highlights for me, for sure. My throat's closing up. Finally, I do have to say one thing. and that this film is subtly noted for. And poignant for me, if I'm honest, is that this was sadly the last soundtrack that was ever composed by Jerry Goldsmith. After a substantial and renowned career spanning, I think, over 60 years. And after penning soundtracks for easily over 200 films and TV shows, many of which have cult status and are some of the best films ever made. I mean, I literally didn't have time to count them all for this review. I just kind of glossed over it. Yep, 200, that sounds about right. Of course, some of his most famous works and some of my all-time favourites, you know, being the likes of Star Trek, Rambo, The Omen, and indeed even Poltergeist, Gremlins, Total Recall. I mean, just thinking of those classic themes in my head brings back happy memories. Now, although I wouldn't consider the score for Back in Action one of his best productions, he did manage to capture the light-hearted and kooky nature of the Looney Tunes, adapting their antics into a score that was a fitting tribute, you know, to the history and the essence of the Tunes. Still very enjoyable, still very Goldsmith. Overall, again, in the end, the plot was just far too muddled, frantic, and with little cohesion with regards to its ultimate goal. It just didn't have the pizzazz and the magic it should have done, you know? It's wild, it's wacky, it's a bit of light-hearted, colourful fun, but not much of anything else. The tunes are great and certainly worth watching the movie for. The human element is occasionally funny, nothing too special, and way over the top at times. A bit self-indulgent for what it was, I think. But still, the tunes are absolutely fantastic, and in this, the film certainly delivers there, you know? So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and definitely love to have you back. But most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.